Good evening. Welcome to tonight's MAP chat show. I'm sure we're in for a great show. We've got a very special speaker. Our speaker tonight was born in Ikopa in the Natal Midlands. And I know only two people who come from Ikopa. One of them is Alan Payton, who wrote, who wrote Cry, My Beloved Country. And the other is our speaker tonight, Terence Ogle. And Terence, just like Alan Payton, is passionate about making a difference and making South Africa a better place. Terence, after matriculating in Ikopa, went to Natal University, where he did a BCom, mastering in IT, economics, and business administration. He is an IT expert and on strategy and project manager, but he's passionate about helping people and making a difference in their lives. He is a certified member of the MAP4LIFE Institute and runs his own coaching program. And tonight he's going to talk to us, and the topic is entitled, Change Your Thoughts and Change Your Life.
Good evening, everyone, and Peter, thank you for that introduction. You made me feel homesick for a while. I really enjoyed my growing up in the Natal Midlands and in Ikopa in particular. So good evening and welcome to all our listeners or anybody who's tuned in. As Peter said, the topic of my talk tonight is change your thoughts, change your life, and I'm excited about actually sharing my thoughts with you on this particular topic. For a long time now, I've been fascinated with the brain in particular, the brain's capacity and the way it operates, and that in conjunction with the other components of who make us up as individuals. So I speak here of the body, the mind, and the soul, and those three working in combination. But tonight, I'm going to focus purely on thoughts and the power that thoughts have in influencing the direction of our lives. So I'm going to begin with a question. And the question is, do you think about what you think about? Okay, I'm going to repeat that question. Do you think about what you think about? And I'm just going to leave that question there without answering it for now, because our thoughts ultimately determine who we are and who we become. As Craig Groeschel put it in his book, Winning the War in the Mind, he says our lives are always moving in the direction of our strongest thoughts. Okay? And if our lives are moving in that direction of our strongest thoughts, we need to ask further question, what are our strongest thoughts? And two, is the direction in which our thoughts are taking us where we want to be? And if the answer is no, we then need to adjust, change our thoughts, which in turn will change our lives. So if our lives indeed are, and I believe they are, influenced and directed by our thoughts, then it is absolutely essential that we pay attention to what we think and how we think. Sadly, though, I find that the reality, or our realities, are often different. That we don't pay sufficient attention to what we think and how we think. We somehow go through life on autopilot. A recent study done by a team of neuroscientists determined that the average person thinks approximately 6,200 thoughts per day. Okay, and that's working on a 16-hour day. So that per hour is approximately 388 thoughts per hour, and 6 thoughts per minute. Now that's a lot of thinking, okay, and that's a lot of thinking that we don't necessarily pay sufficient attention to. So as Peter mentioned, I've been in IT for over 40 years. I've left corporate now. But in IT, we got to understand terms like GIGO, for example, garbage in, garbage out, right? And I often compare the brain, which is a part of the thinking process, I often compare the brain to a computer, right? A computer can be programmed, and so our brains, our minds, can also be programmed. So if we consider our minds to be a repository, right? A repository of information made up of past experiences, current experiences, emotions, etc. And our thoughts dip into this repository, okay? And out of those thoughts come an action, and out of the action comes a result. So what I'm getting to here is if we consider our minds to be a repository, similarly to in the computer world, if we deposit garbage into our thought repository, and that garbage would consist of things like untruths, lies, negative speak, feelings of rejection, then our thoughts and our actions which follow from those will ultimately be influenced by them, and we risk becoming negative, people with low self-esteem, low self-worth, etc. On the contrary, if we deposit into our minds a positive messages, positive information, then we live and lead healthy and fulfilled lives. Scripture informs us that as a man thinks, so he is. Scripture also informs us that we need to transform our lives, right, by the renewing of our minds. And the way I translate that particular scripture is that we've got to be different in our way of thinking. That's part of the renewing of the mind. We've got to be different to the way the world thinks. Craig Rochelle, who I've mentioned, in his book, Winning the War in Your Mind, he relates to the process of thinking as being in war, right? So he links it to warfare. Now, in war, there's combatants. Somebody is fighting somebody else. And the way I've sort of interpreted his book is that the war could be between what is positive and what is negative, or what is good and what is evil, or what is truth and what is lies. Okay. So there's a battle continually going on in our minds across these three spheres, if you want to put it that way. So now I want to test, and I'm hoping as well that the panel takes this particular question that I'm posing now further. And it's not a difficult question. It's not a trick question. And the question is: when last have you tuned into a news station, any news station? It could be local or global, on radio or on television, or in a newspaper, and similarly any newspaper, local newspaper, national newspaper, global newspaper, whatever paper. When last have you tuned in or read and had as a headline a feel-good story? In other words, a positive story. I call this my feel-good barometer. And it sometimes goes for months, even years, before I can actually come across one. And I'm not saying there haven't been, but it's really difficult to find a good news story. And that's because that's the way the world operates, right? The world feeds the media, the news media, the media houses, they feed off negativity because that in turn gets them their ratings, that in turn gets them their viewership, and at the end of the day, that's what sells. Okay, and this is what we fed on a daily basis. So the stuff that's coming from external into our lives, into our minds, is largely, and I would guess it's in the 90% of that that's coming in is negative. So we bombarded on a daily basis with this negativity, and therefore we've got to be careful how we actually manage it. Okay, because if what we think determines where we will be, then we've got to be very careful how we manage our thoughts, what we take in, what we reject, in order that where we end up is actually where we want to end up. Okay, so up to now, I've shared with you what challenges we face. And I think it would be amiss of me not to share then some practices and techniques that we can use to take charge of our thought processes. Okay, there's a scripture which also says we need to take captive our thought processes. This is very much in line with the war analogy as well. But taking captive our thought processes means really managing them and being in control of them, and not allowing, for example, our minds to run our lives. We are not our minds, and our minds are not us. We are defined differently. Okay, so on this particular topic of thoughts and the influence that thoughts have on our lives, there are many references. There's lots of literature out there on this topic. And I believe there's so much literature because the topic is so relevant, especially in this day and age. And I would urge you to, peruse the literature that's there, find those techniques and practices which resonate with you, and apply them in your life. So if we follow on with the computer analogy, we can indeed consider our minds as supercomputers. So as we go through life, our minds are programmed through our experience, through events, be those events external or internal. Our minds are programmed in a way. So I believe we start off with fairly blank minds, not totally, because there is programming in our minds that is there to which is almost at a subconscious level, if you can put it that, and that manages our heartbeats, etc. So the programs that have been put into our minds as we go along life's journey, those can be rewritten and they can be overwritten. And again, to use a computer analogy, they're not hard coded. Okay. And the next few, and I'm going to share 4 practical steps with you as to how you possibly can manage your thoughts and actually reprogram or overwrite what is there. If, as we said, it's most likely to be negative stuff that's there. Okay, so the first one is, in order to manage our thoughts, we need to be aware of them. Okay. We need to be intentional about what we are thinking. Okay. And if we are not aware of our negative or toxic thoughts, there's really nothing we can do about it. So the first step is really to become aware of them. And as I said earlier, Scripture tells us that we need to take our thoughts captive. I recently came across a technique called power pause. And what this does, what this says, is that take 5 minutes out of every hour of the day, okay? And obviously every waking hour of the day. Just take 5 minutes to pause, okay? And as you pause, become fully present and think about the thoughts that you've thought in the last hour, okay? Think about what you've thought in the last hour. And don't stop there. Just briefly analyze it. Was it positive? Was it negative? If it was positive, it's fine. That's what we want. We want positive thoughts to influence the direction of our lives. If it's negative, however, you need to go a step further and understand what the trigger for that negative thought was. Okay, and I'm going to use an illustration here. So, say you're at work, and just before you have this power pause of 5 minutes, you've been in conversation or you've had a coffee with a colleague by the name of John. Okay, so John has now poured out his heart to you, but he's feeling very down, depressed, and he's therefore very negative. He talks about the world wars going on. His relationship with his children isn't good. Everything is wrong with John. You are very likely to come out of that conversation feeling a bit down and feeling maybe a bit inadequate. So what you need to do is identify, okay, that this thought in my mind right now was triggered by my association with John. And if that's the norm with John, right, then you have two options. You either try and influence John to be more positive and less negative, or unfortunately, you have to part ways with John and avoid him as much as possible, because your thinking patterns are influenced so much by those whom we associate with. Okay, so that's the first one. Be aware of your thoughts. Analyze your thoughts and go as far as seeing what the trigger is, and then what action you need to take to make sure that trigger doesn't impact you again. The second one is what I call substitution. Okay, so having identified a negative thought, you need to substitute that, okay, with a positive affirmation. Okay, to use the example I've just used, if after the conversation with John you're feeling inadequate, you're feeling a bit, I wonder how good my life is, and you're starting to doubt your relationships, etc. And what your mind is telling you is that you are inadequate. You're not good enough, right? So the objective there then is to override that, substitute it with a positive affirmation. For example, I am more than able. I'm a conqueror. I'm the head, not the tail. I can do this. But it has to be, again, intentional, and it has to be positive, and it has to address the negative thought that's arisen in your mind. Okay, so substitution. If it's positive, that's great. That's great. If you want to reinforce it, then by all means, dwell on it and feel good about it. If it's a positive thought that you've had in the last hour. Okay, and the third one is not one that you'd be able to do in what I call the power pause. This is more long term. It requires more attention. It requires more time. And the practice is adopt an attitude of gratitude. Okay. So in other words, be content with what you have, rather than worrying about what you don't have. Okay. Be content with where you are, who you are, and just rest in that knowledge that I'm okay. Okay. What I'm not saying though is that this is not settling for less, right? Don't get me wrong. It's not settling for rest. In fact, I believe if you start off from an attitude of gratitude and launch yourself forward into whatever your big dreams are, you're in a better position to move forward towards achieving those goals than if you start from a position of feeling neglected, if you're feeling selfish, if you're feeling let down, all those opposite of gratitude type thoughts, because you got to deal with those first. So attitude of gratitude, absolutely important. And some of you may be already doing this. Well done if you are. But I do encourage every morning for the next 30 days, okay, write down 5 things that you are grateful for in your life. 5 things. They might be big, they might be small. Just write down 5 things. And don't repeat any of those 5 on every subsequent day. So by the time you get to 30, you'd have 30 times 5, 150 gratitude affirmations, if you want to call it. Try it. It really works wonders for your well-being and how you feel about life. The last one and the 4th one is also a longer term one, and I consider this the most important one in managing one's thoughts. And this is to do with identity. And when I say identity, I don't mean, I'm Terence Ogle. This is my ID number is XYZ. My social services number is 123. I'm not talking about that identity. I'm talking about the reason we've been put on this earth. I'm talking about true identity. And one of the ways to get to understand what the truth identity is by asking deep and probing questions. Okay. So while others can help you or can help us actually get to those answers, it's really ourselves that need to take control of getting to the root of those. Okay. So, for example, the questions: who am I? Really, who am I? Who created me? How did they create me? Why am I here? Why am I here at this time, this place? That talks to purpose. So Glenn McQuirk, the founder of MAP4LIFE, he has a quote which says, "You are created for a purpose that the world cannot do without." Okay. And if the world cannot do without, we better be pretty sure, or pretty certain, that we've discovered what our purpose is and we are walking in that purpose. And I'm convinced that if we know in our hearts of hearts what our identity is, what our purpose is, our thoughts and our actions which follow out of those thoughts will align and take us to fulfilling our purpose and ultimately leading significant lives. So in conclusion, I want to conclude with a beautiful passage by John Keel in his book, Mind Power. He is the author of the book, The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari as well, and he's got quite a few other books. And this is what he has to say, and I quote, he says, "Our minds are like gardens, which we can cultivate or neglect. And we each are our own master gardeners. We can cultivate the garden or we can ignore it and let it develop whatever way it will. But make no mistake, we will reap the harvest of our work or the harvest of our neglect." Stop quote. So let's change our thoughts and we will change our lives. Thank you.
Wonderful. Terence, thank you very much. I'm sure everybody enjoyed what Terence had to say. And I think those 4 steps are so powerful. I know that the folk on the panel have put a number of those in place and are using them. And I look forward to discussing them. I did chuckle to myself when Terence spoke about listening to the news. Now, I'm an avid sports fan, but in recent times, my sporting teams haven't been doing that well. I'm a Manchester United fan, and this season in particular, Manchester United have not been well at all. And so I sort of know what happens when you hear these newsreels, and how if we allow things like that to get hold of us, it can ruin the day. And I think we need to be careful about watching the news and reading the newspaper. I've got another one that I look at from time to time, and I look at things like the share prices. And when you see what's happening there, it can be very depressing. So my advice to everybody is just watch what you watch, and which is just as important as watch what you're thinking about. But it's a case of we can allow things like the news to seriously impact our thinking, and then it has an impact that we feel right through the day. I'm just wondering what's happened to my panel, and here comes Amelia, and I'm looking forward to hearing what Amelia's got to say about watching the news and how it impacts on her life. Amelia, what can you tell us about you and the news?
Yes, Peter, I've stopped listening to the news quite a long time ago already. I believe that if something significant happens in the world, the people around you will tell you about it. And especially nowadays with WhatsApp, etc., I think sometimes you get the news quicker than what it can appear in the formal news channels. So as a rule, I try and ignore most of it, and I make sure that the WhatsApp groups and stuff that I am on are people who would usually share the important news with you, and not necessarily all the stuff that makes our lives miserable and makes us unhappy. If you can't do anything about something, it isn't much worth to know about it. And of course, I'm not saying that we must go through life like an ostrich and not know what's going on in the world around us, but we don't have to dwell on the negative aspects. I make a very, very specific point to rather not listen to the news and be very careful of what I actually listen to.
Yeah, I've had it twice today where I've smiled to myself. I've been in meetings with people, and they've been talking about current affairs and news, and one of them spoke about what is happening in Europe, and they spoke about one of the leaders over there. And I had to confess I'd never heard of him. So I thought, well, there we go. And that was from somebody who tells me he doesn't watch the news. And I thought, well, I think I do watch a bit of news, and I wasn't up to date on that. Mm-hmm. And then just before we came on the show, Manusha was talking about earthquakes around the world. And I wasn't aware of that. So, and again, it says we can get too carried away on watching the news and that sort of thing.
I think it's not necessarily.
Manusha was supposed to be on the panel. She was with us, but she's down in East London, and they've got load shedding, so she's lost out on the power. So it's going to be just you and me, Amelia, talking about these things. And maybe we'll get Terence back in a little while. But I'd just like to hear your comments on the 4 tips that Terence gave. And I thought they were wonderful tips. and it's a case of being aware of our thoughts. And he
Yes.
spoke about that power pause. Do you do that?
You know, maybe not the power pause per se, but or let me rather say it this way. I haven't given it a name or thought about it as a power pause, but I do spend time in the morning, just some quiet time, just to think about all the things that you have that you can be grateful for. And I do find, and I basically started with that when the COVID pandemic hit our world.
Yes.
And just kept on thinking every day all the things that you have to be thankful for. And one of the things that I've done specifically as well on the topic of news, because I spend quite a lot of time traveling and in my car, and I've put a whole lot of motivational CDs in my car. So whenever I'm driving, I just hit the CD button. I don't know who's going to come up and who's going to speak for the day. But interestingly enough, I listened to a talk today of Wayne Dyer, and it was all about how powerful your thoughts are and how you actually become what you think about. And Wayne was using the simple example that I think all of us are very familiar with. If you're driving the traffic and you're irritated and you're in a hurry and you get so worked up, and he started making a specific point of, before he climbs in his car, he has this time out where he basically says to himself, there is nothing like an accident. Everything happens the way it should happen. If there is something in his way that's taking him longer to get to his end goal, there's a reason for it. And then he found that he drives much calmer, much more relaxed, and he still gets to his destination at exactly the same time. And through a lot of those examples that he gave, he was illustrating the power of thoughts. If you just look at the things that's happening to you in a different way, it's meant to be that way.
I think that's a wonderful tip. And I'd like to go one further, because I've got a number of friends who enjoy or claim to enjoy listening to talk radio. And then you see them at the other end of the journey, and they're complaining about what people were saying on the radio and how it's affected them. And I say, but guy, it's going to affect you like that. Why do you listen to that sort of show? I personally, I did go through a long period where I had a lot of tapes, and I would listen to the tapes and CDs. I've got out of that habit, and part of it is, I think, because I haven't been doing that much traveling. Certainly, when I go on a long trip and by myself, I just load up on these things, and it's wonderful. Not only listening to things like that, but you can also learn so much by listening to audiobooks and that sort of thing. But it's filling the mind with the right sort of thing. What about affirmations? Do you use affirmations at all?
I do. I believe affirmations is extremely important. I'm quite a big Robin Banks fan as well, and he does a lot of mind power stuff. And Robin has a very nice way of doing affirmations. That rhymes, and that just says, it's easy to say it. And he also says, when you do your affirmations, a lot of people say, but I don't have the time to do positive affirmations. I simply don't have the time. And he gave the tip to say, you should do your affirmations in net time. Net stands for no extra time. So, for example, do your affirmations while you're busy taking a shower, or while you're brushing your teeth, or while you're doing something that you are doing in any case, making your breakfast or whatever you do. Do your affirmations at the same time and repeat it. He also focused a lot on the words that we use. Like Terence said, what you say and what you think about is actually what create your programming. And for example, if a person can learn a habit rather than saying, this is a fiasco, or this is terrible, or this is so bad, rather use words like, this is fascinating.
Yes.
Or instead of
yes,
saying
yes,
something is difficult, say, this
yes,
is challenging. Because a challenge is a positive way to look at the same thing, and a negative way is to say it's difficult. It's the same
yes.
thing. It just has a different feel. It's a different program that you use when you talk to
Yes.
yourself. And we must also remember our thoughts, like Terence likely said, our thoughts are that we listen to the whole day. You are the
Yeah,
sole
no.
person that's listening to your thoughts the whole day. So are you thinking what you are thinking about? Because you are programming
Oh,
yourself, like Terence said, the whole day.
yes. No, I talk about lighting the fire every morning, and how important it is just to get the mind right, and just tune it in, get those vibrations going the right way. And it's so easy to get out of bed the wrong side, and hear that your football team lost last night, and allow that to impact the whole day, and how we
Mhm.
need to do that. But so I think that's important. I think the affirmations and that self-talk. And I have to say that I really love Robin Banks, and what he's got to say about that. Now, what about an attitude of gratitude?
Oh, yes. And we have so much to be thankful for. I was talking to a friend the other day. He was working he was managing a bottle store many, many years ago, here in 95, 96 in Tembisa. And he said his time there, where a lot of people were more focused on, oh, aren't you scared? Don't you think you're in danger, etc. Tony said all that he could think about is how easy it is for him to complain about things, and how many people there are that doesn't even have the basics in life. There are so many
No,
people living across the world without electricity, without running water, without
no,
food every day. And we're so quick to
no,
complain if maybe we can't get hold of our favorite food, or our favorite restaurant closed down. The things that we sometimes complain about is so ridiculous. But when we have this attitude of gratitude, we start remembering how much we have to be thankful for. Even if you are
no,
just thankful for the
Amelia.
fact that you woke up in the morning, that is a big thing to be thankful for. A lot of people did not wake up. A lot
No,
of people
no.
don't have their health. Be thankful for your health.
Yes,
You know,
yes,
there is, and I love what Terence said about every day, write down 5 new things that you haven't written down before, that you can be grateful about. And a lot of people will immediately say, oh, that is not possible, until you start doing it. I've done an
yes,
exercise like that once, and I was amazed. I was amazed how you go deeper and deeper and deeper, and realize how much you have to be thankful for. Guys,
yeah,
we
yeah.
have a lot to be thankful for.
No, I really, and I think that exercise, I think that exercise is an incredible exercise. Uh, I started off with that, where I would not be allowed to repeat a gratitude. Uh, I have to confess that after a while it became stressful, as I started to think about new things. But I just would just get into the flow, and I would write down. I was writing down three things every day, and I just think you can actually feel the days when you can feel how that works. I just like the idea, and coming back to what you said about Robin Banks, and doing these things in, what did you call it, spare time, or whilst you're doing something else. I think it's something to do, and I say whilst one's exercising. Now, I get out every morning, and whilst I'm out there, it's a case of it's a little bit a cross between an affirmation and and a gratitude. And I can feel by the time I'm finished, I can feel those changes, and it just sets the tone for the day. And Amelia, can I ask about identity? Would you like to just comment on what Terence had to say about identity?
Yes, again, our identity, what our true purpose is and why we are really here. Who am I? Why am I here? What is my difference? Or what is my purpose? What is the difference I can make to the world at this time that I'm born in? And I think a lot of people grapple with that still. And a lot of people make the mistake to think their identity must be something grand and something big, like saving the world or saving a country, where it's quite possible that your purpose is to make one person happy, one child, to be a great mother, to be a great father. I read a book by Gavin Sharples called The Gift. And in this book, Gavin has all these souls, or God has all these souls that basically talks about going back to earth. And they talk about what their purpose would be on earth. And some of the souls then make an agreement to meet each other. And one soul, for example, will have an arrangement with another soul to say, we will meet each other on earth, and I will give you the opportunity to forgive me. With other words, the soul is agreeing to come to earth to help a person learn about forgiveness. And it's a big thing if you start thinking about it, just to be, if your purpose could just be to be an amazing mother, an amazing friend, an amazing neighbor.
Wonderful.
It doesn't have to be, all of us doesn't have to be a Nelson Mandela or a Mother Teresa. Your purpose can absolutely be that one thing that when you do this, you are so energized. You are so, you feel so fulfilled, and you can do it from the morning to the night without getting tired when you're on.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. Terence, have you enjoyed our comments? Have we touched what you wanted to hear us?
Absolutely spot on, really. And you've added so much texture to what is being said. It is a very broad and deep topic, but we've narrowed it down, and absolutely, extremely pleased with the comments you guys have made. And really, I think generally, we don't pay enough attention to our thoughts, and I certainly am guilty of it as well, because I sometimes finding myself going down the path of just because of something that's upset me, either somebody jumps a queue or something, my thought process goes totally haywire. Then I become negative, and I upset my wife because I've said the wrong thing, and these negative thoughts have a tendency of spiraling. And they spiral so quickly because they feed on each other. Whereas positive thoughts are different, because positive thoughts have that calming effect, that feel-good effect. They're longer lasting, and you just feel good. I mean, but we all fall into that mistake. We're human, I guess. And
I wanted to add one thing that came up, and I don't know whether the listeners picked it up, but Octavia spoke about a thought logbook and how she's going to install a thought logbook as her accountability partner. And I think that's very important. I was going to just touch on journaling, because I think journaling is also tied up in part of those suggestions that you made, that we can journal, that we can journal our affirmations, and we journal our gratitudes. I think those are important. But I thought I would just wrap it all up. And I thought you were going to quote from the scriptures, and I've just got a verse in front of me, and I thought it would be a way to close. And now, dear brothers and sisters, one final thing. Fix your thoughts on what is true and honorable and right and pure and lovely and admirable. Think about the things that are excellent and worthy of praise. Keep putting into practice all you've learned and received from me. And that's from St. Paul. And I think that just sums up what you've been talking about, Terence. And
Absolutely.
it's been wonderful chatting to you all. Thank you. And thank you to all our listeners. I hope you enjoyed the show. Till next week. Good night.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Amelia.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.